So, unless someone has been under a rock within the SDA community, we have an idea as to what's happening lately among us. It's not new. Some of these things aren't new. But we can clearly see, brothers and sisters, that there has been, how can I say it? Lately, a lot of some from among the leadership of the church, some have been boldly have been coming out and denouncing really Adventist church as a whole. And there's many different videos out there, and folks make different points. I mean, and we're gonna talk about some of these things, and there are some things we can kind of see what they mean and why they think like that, and we can kind of see our fault as a church, and we're gonna address that a little bit as well. Our fault and I would say causing some of these misunderstanding, but there has been a lot of rethinking of Adventism happening, and that is why we entitled our presentation tonight Rebooting versus Rethinking Adventism, because those are different. And this is where I'm going to ask Brother Anderson to kind of explain to us, because you did a video, Brother Anderson, talking about the difference between, rebooting and rethinking Adventism. So why don't you give us a little backdrop, explain to us a little bit about the idea of rebooting Adventism. Then we'll get into the difference between rebooting and rethinking Adventism. So tell us a little bit about rebooting Adventism.
Yeah, so rebooting Adventism is sort of an idea that came into my mind a little over 2 years ago. I just sort of saw the handwriting on the wall as far as realizing that there were going to be more and more people that were leaving the church. And if you were to go to the YouTube channel and look at that series, Rebooting Adventism, you'll see I had a video on there where I basically showed that people are leaving for two different reasons. Mm-hmm. Now, I think tonight we're going to touch on both tonight, but I think we're going to be leaning more towards those who are leaving because of either a misunderstanding mm-hmm. of our doctrines, or they just don't believe in certain doctrines. And so what I try to do with rebooting Adventism, I liken it to a computer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have your computer, and I work in IT, so let me just nerd out a little bit here.
Got you. No problem.
All right. So you have your operating system, which is like Windows. Okay, so that's your operating system, and then you have your programs that are installed on there. So that's your web browser, Microsoft Word, Office, things of that nature. And you can be on the internet, and you go into websites, maybe you're getting pop-ups and things of that nature, and your computer stops running at an optimal level. It starts dragging, it's slow, things are not opening properly. Like I said, you could be getting, pop-up warnings and things of that nature.
Right.
And so the core operating system is fine. The installed programs can even be fine. But sometimes you just need to reboot the computer. Just to reboot it, to clear all of that, all the junk out of the memory mm-hmm. and things of that nature. And then when you reboot it, it's running smoothly again. So that's sort of how I have it in my mind when we're talking about rebooting Adventism. It's not about saying, well, I don't like, we could start a Windows versus Mac war here today, mm-hmm, but mm-hmm. it's not about necessarily saying, well, I don't like this operating system anymore. I don't like the Mac anymore, Windows anymore. So I'm going to get a Mac instead, and that will fix all my problems. So that's what a lot of people are doing right now. In this sort of tech parable, mm-hmm. I'm likening the Adventist church to, Windows, your operating system. And some people are saying, I don't like this operating system anymore. I'm going to move from Windows to Mac. And I don't believe that's the correct solution. I believe that the correct solution is to reboot, to restart, to clean out the junk that has accumulated while the computer is running, and while we're going about our business and things of that nature. Um, I look at our, the core Adventist beliefs and the doctrines. I believe that they're sound. I believe that they're stable. But I believe some of the pop-ups that have come into the church is, a lot of the false ideas, the false attitudes, the anger, the variance, the fighting, the strife. Not making Christ the center of the message. That's obviously the most important thing. So rebooting in my mind, when I use that term, it's just really a representative of revival, reformation, and finding our first love again, which is Christ. You see that in Revelation chapter 2,
right,
when it's the message to the first church. It says you have lost your first love. So it's about just rebooting our experience. And when I talk about rebooting Adventism, a lot of times where people go off track, and I think it's the biggest mistake that causes people to have so much frustration, is a lot of times we say, we need revival and reformation. We need the church needs to be fixed, or the conference needs to be fixed. And we always speak in these broad terms. And what I try to explain to people is, you can't sit around waiting for everyone else to change, or to reboot, revive, reform, whatever reword that you want to use. It has to start individually.
Yes.
And when it happens individually, and enough of us are doing that, then we can have a collective experience where things can get better. So that's how I keep my sanity. I'm not always looking and watching at, the negative things that are going on. I see things, but it doesn't mean I have to say something about everything. You know what I mean? So
right.
That's how I pick my spots. Obviously, I don't think we should just remain silent.
Right.
If we see certain things. However, there can be an imbalance there. And so when I'm talking about rebooting Adventism, I'm talking about rebooting all of that. I'm talking about getting back to the core, getting back to Christ, getting back to mission, and not to be swayed and slowed down by all these pop-ups that we see everywhere. So
and they
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about rebooting Adventism.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. So with the little knowledge that I have about computers, when you reboot a computer, you don't change what makes that computer that computer.
Correct.
You don't change the fundamental of that computer. You just reboot it.
Right.
Because like you said, it's been bugged down, and it kind of like you're not changing the foundation of that computer. You're not changing the operating system. None of that. You're not touching that. You're only rebooting it. So that's good. That's good. Yeah. And you mentioned a lot of time we do get bogged down in we get sidetracked. I'm telling you, I see it, brother. I see it. And you know how the devil works. When the devil gets you sidetracked, the thing that gets you sidetracked is not an unimportant thing. It is going to be something you'll look at, you say, yeah, we must deal with that. And by you dealing with it, the work that is more crucial at that moment for us to be doing is been neglected. Yeah. It's been neglected. So it is very important, the idea of rebooting Adventism. Now, we also hear the idea of rethinking Adventism. So those are different.
Correct.
Yes, those are. I'm thinking those are different. We have rethinking Adventism and we have rebooting Adventism. So talk to us a little bit about the difference between those two.
Yeah. So to take that analogy a little bit further, as I mentioned, it's really the difference between moving to a completely different operating system. So then that's where you get into the debates. Android versus iPhone. Windows versus Macs. So there are people who are leaving, who are looking at Adventism as a system, and they believe that Adventism, the teachings. Many believe that they say they're not biblical, and so
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing now is they're completely abandoning that, and they're moving over to something else. So, this term rethinking Adventism, obviously that's something that has come into people's consciousness recently with Ryan Day and
Mm-hmm.
him leaving the church, and he named his ministry Rethinking Adventism. And it's been very interesting. I haven't been like watching everything that he's doing or whatever the case may be, but things pop up in my feed here and there, and
Mm-hmm.
I see the different thumbnails and things like that. I haven't had an opportunity to look at all the videos he's doing. I don't even know if I will, quite honestly, but yeah, he's going down a path where all of the distinctive Adventist doctrines for him,
Right.
he's abandoning them. The investigative judgment, the spirit of prophecy, all of these types of things that are core.
Mm-hmm.
We could say that's core to the operating system. In our analogy.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, he feels like these things are off, and so he's abandoning those teachings. So that's his perspective and his view on rethinking Adventism. That's what he means by that. Yeah.
Mm.
From my perspective on the outside looking in, that's what I'm seeing happen.